Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, an island show that strives to look at the issues on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada, and even further afield. And way across a field in distant Saanich is my co-host with the most, the Croatian sensation himself, John Jurisic, or as he is known to his many Italian fans, the great Maldini. And buongiorno Giovanni, come stai?
Bene. You know, Robin, a branch of my Croatian family actually came from Italy. And their name is Maldini. In fact, there's a tiny bit of royal blood in there. They were barons. So there's a tiny bit of Baron Maldini going along in the Rumble Room. So when you see me getting excited and waving my hands around, it's my Italian gene pool peeking through the curtains, Rob.
I always thought you had some of that royal jelly. And Johnny, certainly things to get excited about this week. We're going to kick things off with people getting, I think, over excited and actually belligerent in a very negative way. This is not the way to greet the Prime Minister of Canada. In Belleville, Ontario, Justin Trudeau met a throng of loud and angry demonstrators, with at least one of them waving a Trump-like flag as they screamed traitor, and lots of obscenities. And I say give your heads a shake. This doesn't hurt Justin Trudeau. In fact, it's the public reaction that really matters here, and it is totally against this kind of behavior. People don't like this, even if they don't like Trudeau. I'm not a fan of our Prime Minister, but this isn't the way to win public support, and this type of behavior really can't stand. So my question now is, where is Pierre Poilievre in all of this? Why isn't he stepping forward and saying, no, this isn't the way to behave? I think that he basically tries to court everybody who's in opposition to the Prime Minister, and that can be hazardous because there's a lot of people who might consider voting Tory, but they don't like people who support people who are belligerent like that and threatening. It just doesn't work. And Poilievre can do better. He must do better if he hopes to one day be the Prime Minister of Canada.
Robin, I couldn't agree with you more. Well said. We can't have that kind of crap in Canada. So when I see a crowd like this, I wonder if we're getting potentially exactly the kind of leadership we deserve. People need to vote. I just know that average Canadians really hate seeing this. But Robin, it's time to move to the Rumble Room's major topic of the show, a twist on the housing shortage.
That's right, Johnny. And we're going to have to talk about two opposing camps now that have formed in the face of this rapid development, this rapid growth, this unquenchable housing shortage, both locally, provincially, across the country. It is a huge problem. And on the one side, we have developers. And the developers and builders are ready to break ground, and they want to build. They want to meet this challenge head on, and we're going to be seeing their work all over this province, and we'll also be seeing if density growing really makes a difference, and if buildings getting taller really helps the situation.
Robin, on the other side, and there's always another side, there's always two sides to every issue, and we're very proud of representing those on the Rumble Room. The other side's represented by people who want to see housing development dramatically slowed down. We recently saw civic elections last November bring in new mayors and councils determined to pull the reins on construction. The more condos that improve affordability apparently only create gridlock, overcrowding, and the loss of our once comfortable neighborhoods.
You know, we've had councils in Victoria proper that really tried to stop development in many ways. They wanted to see a limit on how big buildings could be. They wanted a lot of buildings designated heritage sites. They wanted to make sure we didn't rip everything down and replace it with big, dense towers. Pam Madoff, the former councillor, was a champion of this group. And there's a lot of people in the wider community that still think this way. And we have a provincial government, in contrast, that's determined to see a lot more development and density. They want to see the housing. They want to see the density. and they want to see new builds in Greater Vancouver and Greater Victoria. David Eby wants more, and the council in Victoria is certainly beating the drum. So let's look now at a site that we can clearly see has this issue unfolding, the Bayview property in Vic West.
Yeah, you bet, Robin. The City of Victoria is accepting submissions until the 4th of August, expressing support or opposition to a major building project. Soon, a hearing will be held to determine if rezoning will be granted to allow this major project to go forward. Here are the nuts and bolts of the developer's submission. Bayview Place is located in Vic West, behind the Songhees development, and looking out towards Victoria's Inner Harbour and the beautiful Olympic Mountains. The application by Focus Equities to rezone the Roundhouse on Bayview lands represents the second half of the 20-acre project, following the earlier hillside redevelopment directly to the east. Focus Equities and Bayview Place are owned by Ken and Patricia Mariage. This Roundhouse proposal follows the same principles and values that guided an earlier 2008 concept. That plan eventually stalled as the project was deemed not viable at that time. This new rezoning proposal calls for the construction of 9 residential buildings encompassing 1,900 units. These buildings include condos, rentals, and below-market social housing. 3 of the buildings also could feature hotel facilities. This plan includes lower building heights than first considered. The buildings now would range from 18 to 29 stories. This will reduce density and shadowing, improving public spaces and the visual presence of the heritage buildings. The E&N Roundhouse site, 76,000 square feet of new retail commercial space will be available in the Roundhouse precinct. 40% of the site is dedicated to publicly accessible amenity areas with roadways, bikeways, pathways, and the preservation of the existing rail lines. Focus Equities seeks rezoning to be followed directly by application for building permits. An agreement with the Greater Victoria Housing Society ensures the land for their proposed below-market rental building is free and immediately shovel-ready once zoning is approved. This Roundhouse development provides densification close to downtown.
Johnny, this whole issue basically came our way because of a phone call I received from a gentleman named Victor. He lives in the Songhees. He's close to where the big Bayview development is supposed to start. And he's amongst a group of neighbors that are very concerned about it, concerned about the height, concerned about the size, concerned about the disruption, and asked if we would dig in. And I said, I would look at the story, but I would look at it in both ways. I would talk to both the people that are unhappy, but I would need to talk to the developer, Ken Mariash, and find out what he thinks and what he has to say for somebody who's been working on this project for many, many years. And just to be very, very transparent, I've known Ken Mariash for a long time. I also know a lot of people that stand strongly with Ken Mariash and are big supporters of his, including the likes of Keith Dagg and Cedric Steele. So, there's a lot of big wheels in the city of Victoria that are actually standing four square with this developer, but that doesn't mean that the people that are concerned don't have the right to their point of view. And it's important to illustrate both sides of this story. So we are going to try to do our best to do just that. Show both sides, be as fair as possible. It's a hot and contentious issue. And with any luck at all, John, we'll be able to really show this as putting a bit of a light on the housing crisis from a couple of perspectives. When you look out the door of your deck and you see on the left-hand side, you've got the whole harbor there and it's very beautiful. What are you thinking as you look over on the right-hand side? There must have always been that awareness that this was perhaps all going to come to an end.
Well, we always knew something was going to be built there. It was a question of what. And I'm very familiar with the previous proposal, so because I've seen it, I was involved with it and seeing it go through the approval process. But looking at what I see drawn right now and thinking that the scale of those buildings, it's just going to be quite overwhelming, I think.
So these are some of the things that have been thrown out in the materials that I've read, and I'm sure it's stuff that you've been asked about before, but let's get it out here. It suggests that your proposal's plans and drawings don't fully portray the whole site and how the size and density of proposed development will infringe on current views of current Songhees properties. Do residents in neighboring buildings actually have a legitimate beef?
That's fun. Here, I'll show you. We've been good friends with these guys, 90% of them. For 25 years, this went from being worthless. When we got this done, it doubled in value. When we do this, it'll triple in value. Because this is better by miles than a secondary site. So say if we put a Four Seasons here, it changes the character of the area from, I would say, a B plus to an A plus. Guess who benefits? And the sun shines here first, not there.
Well, I mean, this rezoning proposal has been, they've been working on it for years and years, but they've now advanced it to City Council. They have a formal application. The city sent out a letter describing the new proposal in very vague and general terms, but not really illustrating it with any drawings or anything. So I think most people probably didn't understand the implications of that letter, of what was being proposed on that site across the street from where they live. If they had included some of these drawings, you know, some of these drawings to really say, this is what's being proposed. So when people found out and saw the drawings, they were horrified at the scale and density of this big wall of 9 towers being proposed right across the street.
Your previous proposal over a decade ago had 5 buildings no higher than 20 stories. Now this new proposal calls for 9 buildings, including 3 hotels. Is it true your new vision is not being clearly illustrated and explained?
No, that's not true. Our original zoning was for half the site. And this is what it was zoned for. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're there, all in the same place. They haven't moved an inch. We didn't want to close it. 2008, are you kidding? The zoning was awful. But what happened there was our investors ran away, and I had to pay all the bills, $20 million. So I thought, what the hell? The city said, if we're going to let you out of these bad design guidelines, restrictions where you can't change a wall or move anything or do anything like that, and you have to build sketches, sure, we realize that it's not buildable. We'll let you off the hook. You can redesign it, rezone it, but we got to do more. So
is it the city that was actually pushing you to go higher?
yeah, well,
Because that's really what, that's another central complaint here, is that you've gone much, much higher than the original proposal with the buildings.
Oh, this area here was, the maximum height was 10. That's why Songhees failed. Look at what happened on the front. Nothing but bankruptcy. Nobody would do another investment here. When they say wrong side of the bridge, they mean it. So us getting 20 even, or 23 was a miracle. Today, they would like to go to 38. That's modern design. You get thin towers. Not more. Everybody's confusing height with density. It's not the case. This is less dense than that. And it's got 25-story height. Just because you go up, your floor plan shrinks. And in fact, you open up everything, you give everybody a view from the ground, from up in the building, but you don't necessarily put extra density. So what the city would like to see is 38 floors, the same low density. Obviously they'd like 6, but in order to keep the peace, we're not gonna make any money anyway, so it doesn't matter much. We'll do 4.
We have in Victoria a history of new development in the city that respects the scale and character of Victoria. Generally, that's been a fairly low and modest scale. But if you look at developments like the Selkirk waterfront, the rail yards that Chris Lefebvre developed, the Dockside Green, the new Capitol Park behind the legislature, these are all modestly scaled developments. They've got a reasonable degree of density, but nothing like this. This is just way beyond what's acceptable in our view, and doesn't really reflect that existing scale and character of Victoria.
And so having that kind of thinking isn't doing anybody any good. And that's one of the reasons why, downtown is struggling. Because over 100 of those buildings have been designated with red dots. And you can't put a tower anywhere because you're going to run right into one of those and you can't get a footprint.
I was told, calling your offices, you need a certain level of development in order to enhance the area and grow the area enough that businesses will actually want to move into the Roundhouse, that they say they need people that are going to walk in from the neighborhood as much as they need people that are willing to come in from other parts of the city or tourists. So how important in your mind is that in terms of raising the number of people that actually live in the area?
Well, it's critical because in the years of sitting there, we went to all the different really, good tenants that would go into this marketplace, because there's 100 of these in North America that have all failed. There isn't a history of one that's made it. Partly because the buildings are so big. If you go to Toronto, they overwhelm the whole area. I mean, you're sitting up there looking down, all you see is these great big empty roundhouse buildings. They're made for like 200,000 pound trains. A person standing in the middle of here is in the middle of nowhere. That's huge. You could that's a whole city block. So the tenants, potential tenants, just said no. There's no population in the area. There's zero population here. Fish don't buy food. That's 180 degrees. There's no population here and no population there, and very little north. So how could they survive?
Heritage is very important. It's part of your professional background with the city of Victoria, and I think there's a lot of people in this city that have long wanted to see something happen with this site of the Roundhouse. It's a potential heritage jewel that's been left to rust, if you like.
Well, obviously it's going to take some additional density to make the project work. We're not denying that. Nobody's saying don't build anything. We're just saying let's do something that's a little more reasonable. Nobody's really ever seen the numbers of what it's going to take to compensate with the density for how much it's going to take to rehabilitate. He had an approved proposal 15 years ago, but nothing ever happened.
Do they know that I started that deal and dropped out because my partner who got the deal wanted it for free and made all those promises? I would never do that. Those promises were crazy. I could have walked away and said, well, too bad. And we knew that the zoning was no good. That's why the investors walked. But I said, okay, I'll take whatever I can get, because I have to close this and pay all these bills. And I think our original plan of this and this together is a good idea, because we built all this for that.
The province is making a lot of noise about housing and housing density and how we should be fast-tracking bigger developments and getting more places built. And the city seems to be responding to that in a very clear way. Do you feel the city is acting too rashly to push through for this development? Are they too enthusiastic when they see the number of new places that are going to be built in terms of dealing with the housing crisis?
Well, if you watched some of the committee, the whole discussion about this proposal, the city's own urban design staff made a suggestion to City Council that a slightly smaller density would improve the urban design quite significantly by some more slender towers, further spaced apart. The podiums would not impose on the pedestrian spaces quite so much. I thought that was a fairly reasonable proposal. Council hasn't really reacted to that. But the whole idea of what's an appropriate scale and character. I mean, if you look at cities in Europe like Barcelona, like many of the old cities of Europe have very high densities. They're very tightly packed. They're not high-rise buildings. Victoria is known as a city for a historic charm, a scale and character that is universal through tourists throughout North America. But when you come in on the Clipper and on the Coho and you look across at Songhees and suddenly you see a wall of buildings, what's it going to look like? It's going to look like Vancouver. It's going to look like Toronto. It no longer looks like Victoria.
Well, first of all, if you go across the harbor and look at our tallest building, you can't see it. It's already 26 floors. So when I'm showing somebody that's at the cruise ship or on their yacht, I have to drive them here.
We don't think this proposal is reasonable in terms of the scale, the character, the height. 2 towers proposed right next to a 1-story heritage building. Even city staff said in the report it threatens to overwhelm the historic character, and this is a nationally significant historic site.
So the city of Victoria, for the most part, is it supportive of what you're proposing here, or do you
No,
know?
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Everybody's a bit tentative because the city was run by one person that was able to stop all development for 30, 40 years. And people get used to that. They come here for that reason. They stay here for that reason. They think that way. It's not the right thing for their kids. It's not the right thing for people. But if one person says that's the way it's going to be and gets 4 people to vote with them for 30 years, that's how it's going to be. So for the city to get sort of up and running on development period, they have to shake that off. That particular person even hired all the staff that was in the city for years. And some of that staff's still there.
And when you bought in this development, you knew there was going to be a development across the way when you first came here, and also you knew this because of your professional work. You knew at some point this was all going to be developed. So none of this really can come as a shock to you that this
Well, we knew what was approved under the previous proposal, but this is just radically different than what was approved in the past.
The city wanted affordable housing up here, was empty. They wanted a rental building up here, which was empty. That area was all just rough and all opened up for rail purposes. So we said, okay, that's a good idea.
Well, I have no objection to low-cost housing. Obviously, affordable housing is needed everywhere. But I think what's the price you're paying for that little corner that's going to be affordable housing? The price you're paying is this massive development.
Why can't those few people that don't know about the project come and find out?
right.
Some of them are PhDs, for God's sake.
Is there a reason you haven't gone to see Ken Mariash himself? He's up at his office pretty well all the time. He's willing to talk to the public.
I've met Ken Mariash before. I've been involved in discussions about this proposal on many occasions in the past in a professional capacity. But I think now he's pretty much cast in stone what he wants to do, and he's submitted it to the city. At this point, all we are saying is people should be getting informed so they can make an informed decision about that. We are in opposition, and I don't see much point in having a discussion with him at this
You don't
time.
think there'd be any point in talking to him one-on-one?
I don't think he's going to change his mind about what he's doing.
Our door is open, if they want, 24 hours a day, but for sure, it's a glass door. And if you could see us here and we didn't let you in, people would know about it.
Would you welcome them to come?
We've invited them over and over again. How hard was it to get here? You got here in 20 minutes? People walking in and out of that door all the time.
So at this point, nothing's been approved.
No.
There is going to be a public hearing. I take it you'll be at the public hearing. You've already written a letter
If I
to the
can,
Times
I will be
columnist.
there. Yes, definitely.
Do you think that the city will listen?
That's the $1 million question.
Any prediction?
Well, from listening to the committee of the whole discussion, I think they're going to approve it.
I'm sitting here 7 days a week, Saturday and Sunday. Who in their right mind wouldn't come and try to get a briefing? 9,000 other people made it. Why can't 30 people make it?
So there you have it. 2 clear points of view. Somebody who doesn't want to see all of this new development, certainly on the scale that's been proposed, and the developer who's obviously put years of thought and work into trying to come up with a solution that's going to build sustainability, and so that they can recreate the roundhouse, make the roundhouse viable, but still have lots of people living in the area comfortably and hopefully not disrupting the area. And it's a fine line between the two, but they don't seem to cross very easily. I really think that the protesters have made a tactical error in judgment, not going down and meeting with Ken Mariash, having it out face to face. If they can't reach any kind of consensus, fine, they can report that. But to not even go and talk to the developer, I think, was a mistake. But in the long run, it's going to be up to the city to determine what should be best for this area. So we'll have to wait and see on that. One thing, Greater Victoria has already neared 400,000 people, and there's more coming all the time. They want places to live. In another decade, we could have 500,000. This is not an issue that's going to go away. It's going to remain contentious. And John, that's my final word on it.
Robin, fascinating. This has been so interesting and great research to demonstrate there are two sides to this issue. Here's my take on this development and housing development in general. I started advocating for what I call workplace housing, middle-class housing, maybe 10, 11 years ago. Think about that. That's pre-COVID. That's pre-Trump. That's pre-Obama. Okay? This has been going on for a while. This is not a new issue. And guess what? We can't solve it. We're stuck. Our society's stuck with issues we can't solve. All of a sudden, a solution comes to help provide housing, provide families with places to raise their children and communities to grow and the middle class to sponsor, to develop. Come on, let's do this. These things have got to work out. And if it means talking amongst each other, let's do it. I'm so firmly in favor of what you're advocating, that we need to talk about these things and do them and get solutions on the table and execute them and start providing housing. We're done talking about it, Rob. I've spent a long time doing this, and I'm getting frustrated and angry by the lack of action on all levels of government.
Well, you know, I do think that the provincial government at this point is making the right noises, and they're saying, let's get going and building. And I do take the point of view, or I at least understand and am empathetic to the point of view of those who don't want to see us moving so rapidly, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of reasons people come to Victoria, because they love the leafy streets, they love the beautiful old buildings, and I do too. There must be a way that we can mix this with new development as well. We don't have to have it in every block, but we do need to have it in our community. And going forward, Victoria is going to grow a lot bigger, whether we wanted to or not. We just have to learn how to manage it. So on that happy note, John, it's almost time to wrap this thing. Maybe you could again tell our many viewers how they can continue to support the Rumble Room. We've had, 1.2 million views on the show since we started, and we really appreciate that. So if people would like to be able to follow us more regularly or encourage their friends to see the show, you can maybe outline how they can do that.
Absolutely. Great show. Great show. And hopefully our words and your interviews and the great research that you've done on behalf of the VRR will make a difference. Please, let's make a difference on this issue, which seems to be stuck in first gear. So to the 1.2 million viewers and growing, to the bazillion viewers who haven't yet seen our show, please feel free to come over to Facebook, the Mothership, join us, follow us. We are also on Twitter, very active, which is now, I believe, called Zed. I'm going to have to change the way that's called. I can't believe it. Thank you, Elon Musk. All of our interviews since we began are on YouTube. We also have discourse on numerous Facebook news groups. We're on Instagram, and we're also on TikTok. So for now, I remain half of me, the Croatian sensation, and occasionally, when I care to admit, the great Maldini, Johnny Jurisic.
I just love it, John. I wished I had an Italian name, but I do have some Italian in-laws. So, you know, I do my best, and they certainly like to rumble. So I suggest Let's rumble on.